Welcome to the explainer. We're living in this world that's just drowning in data. So to make sense of it all, we've built these incredible tools, right? AI and analytics. But here's the thing. In this massive flood of information, we've got to ask a really critical question. What's the role for human decision-making in all of this? Let's dive in and find out. All right, I want to start with just one number, 463. Now, it might not look like much, but this number, it's quickly coming to define our entire modern world. And honestly, it represents a challenge on a scale we have never, ever seen before. So what on earth does it mean? Well, what it means is that by 2025, we're looking at an estimated 463 exabytes of data being created every single day. Now, to put that into perspective for you, that's 463 times million terabytes. Think about it. Every photo we snap, every show we stream, every single purchase we make, it's all just feeding into this giant global data swamp. And that right there brings us to what we call the 463 exabyte problem. I mean, we're generating this absolute tidal wave of information, but we're also at a huge risk of just drowning in it. So the real question is, how do you find the signal in all that noise? How do we turn all this raw data into something we can actually use? Real insight? This problem got so massive, so out of control, that by 2005, it finally got its own name, big data. And it wasn't just about the sheer size, the volume of it all. It was the speed, the complexity. Our old tools were basically like trying to bail out the ocean with a tiny teaspoon. It was clear we needed a completely new way of thinking about this. So how in the world do we navigate this data deluge? Well, we developed an incredibly powerful new toolkit, and that brings us to artificial intelligence and data analytics. You can think of these as the modern instruments for navigating this brand new world. Now, AI didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Its history is actually this series of pretty dramatic booms and busts. After all that initial optimism back in the 50s, progress just stalled. That led to these periods called AI winters, where, the funding just completely dried up. It actually took decades of quiet research, of breakthroughs, and then, boom, AlphaGo's victory in 2016. That was the moment that finally ignited the AI spring we're all living in today. Okay, so these terms, data science, AI, autonomy, they get thrown around a lot, often interchangeably, but they actually fit together really neatly. Think of data science as the whole field of study, the big umbrella. Now, within that field, artificial intelligence is the tool we build to think and learn. And autonomy? Well, that's when we give that tool a body, sensors, motors, to actually act in the real world. A self-driving car is a perfect example. And the engine that's really driving all of this is machine learning. It basically comes in three main flavors. You've got supervised learning. That's kind of like teaching with flashcards. You show it examples that are already labeled. Then there's unsupervised learning, which is more like a detective. It has to look for hidden patterns in the data all on its own. And finally, reinforcement learning. Think of this like training a puppy. It learns by trial and error, getting rewarded every time it gets closer to its goal. All right, let's zoom in on the most common type for a second, supervised learning. It's really a two-step process. First up, you have the heavy lifting, the training phase. This is where a model gets fed a massive, and I mean massive, carefully labeled data set. This is the foundation, right? And only after all that work can it move on to the classification phase, where it takes what it learned and applies it to make predictions on brand new, unseen data. Okay, so we've got this insane amount of data, and we have these incredibly sophisticated tools to work with it. The crucial point now is, how do we actually use them? How do we get from all that raw information to making smarter, faster, and just plain better decisions? And this is where the 4 types of analytics come in. You can almost think of it as a journey or a maturity model for any organization that wants to be data-driven. Most places start with descriptive analytics, just figuring out what happened. Then they move to diagnostic, asking why it happened. But the real power, that starts to kick in with predictive analytics, which forecasts what will happen. The holy grail, though, the ultimate goal, is prescriptive analytics. This doesn't just predict the future, it gives you recommendations on what you should actually do about it. And listen, this isn't some far-off, theoretical thing. It is already changing our world right now. In healthcare, it's being used to predict when patients might miss appointments so clinics can step in. Every single personalized recommendation you see when you're shopping online, that's driven by this stuff.
Cities are using it to forecast crime hotspots, and financial firms are using it to try and get ahead of market volatility. It's everywhere.
Okay, so we have the data, we have the tools, and we're clearly seeing the results. But this is where the story gets really, really interesting and a whole lot more complicated. Because it turns out this whole thing isn't just about machines and algorithms. It's about us. And that really leads us to the single most important question in all of this. Is data actually enough? I mean, really, can an algorithm, no matter how powerful it is, truly capture all the subtle nuances of complex human decision-making? Well, according to research by a cognitive psychologist named Gary Klein, the answer is a pretty resounding no. What he found was that even in these high-stakes, super data-rich environments, experts make up to 90% of their critical decisions using intuition. Yeah, that gut feeling, that instinct that's built from years and years of experience, and that's something that's not so easily captured in a spreadsheet. And this really points to these fundamental human qualities that are just incredibly difficult for machines to replicate, right? Our agency, the ability to make our own free choices, our capacity for abstraction and for empathy, our ability to blend logic with emotion with creativity, and so crucially, our shared sense of ethics, our fundamental understanding of right and wrong. This brings us to a huge, huge challenge in AI, what's known as the black box problem. See, with some of the most complex deep learning models, not even the people who created them can fully explain why the AI made a specific decision. It works, but we don't exactly know how. And this raises some really serious questions, right? What about hidden biases in the data? And who's accountable when an algorithm gets it wrong? So this intersection of data, AI, and humanity, it's not just some technical or philosophical debate for academics. No, it's actively shaping the future of global competition and power right now. And world leaders are not being subtle about this at all. When Vladimir Putin said back in 2017 that, quote, whoever leads in artificial intelligence will rule the world, he basically pushed the idea of a global AI race right to the forefront. Leadership in AI is now seen as being just as critical to national security as having a powerful military or a strong economy. So as this race really starts to heat up, we're seeing two very different models emerge. On one side, you have China's state-driven approach. They have a crystal clear plan, global AI leadership by 2030. And they're leveraging some huge advantages, massive data sets, fewer privacy restrictions, and really strong government backing for their tech giants. On the other side, you've got the United States, which has a more market-driven system, one that's really powered by private sector innovation. So as we keep integrating these incredibly powerful tools into every single corner of our society, the ultimate question really isn't about what the technology can do, it's about how we as humans choose to use it. The AI is providing the analysis, sure, but who should be making that final call? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.